Welcome back to Night Visitors. Oregon. Beautiful forests, quiet towns, friendly faces. It's the kind of place where nothing bad should ever happen. But what if I told you that some of the most disturbing events in American history happened right here? What if the person serving your food, driving past you on the highway, or working the night shift at a hospital wasn't who they seemed to be? Tonight, I'm sharing 6 true stories from Oregon that will make you look at everyday life differently. These aren't legends, these aren't rumors. Every single one of these stories is real, and some of them, well, they're still happening. Before we start, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. And one more thing, after you hear these stories, you might never look at a salad bar, a truck stop, or even a school bus the same way again. Ready? Let's begin. My name is Maria Santos, and I've been working in restaurants for 8 years. I started as a dishwasher when I was 20, worked my way up to server, and now I'm a shift supervisor at Danny's Diner in Salem, Oregon. I've seen food poisoning before. Maybe a customer gets sick from undercooked chicken or old mayo. It happens. But what I witnessed in September 1984 wasn't just bad food. It was something much worse. Something that made me realize how easily our entire world can be poisoned by people who think they're saving it. I need to tell you this story because what happened in Salem changed everything. Not just for me, but for how America thinks about terrorism. And it all started with a salad bar that I restocked every morning for 3 years. September 17th, 1984. Monday morning, 6 a.m. I unlocked the back door of Danny's Diner like I had 1,000 times before. The smell hit me first. That familiar mix of cleaning supplies and yesterday's coffee. Our morning prep routine never changed. Turn on the fryers, start the coffee, check the walk-in cooler, and restock the salad bar. Danny's wasn't fancy, but we were proud of our fresh salad bar. We had 12 different items: lettuce, tomatoes, carrots, cheese, croutons, 3 different dressings. I made sure everything was clean and cold. Food safety was my job, and I took it seriously. The first customer came in at 7:30. Mrs. Peterson, a regular who always ordered coffee and used our salad bar for breakfast. Strange choice. But she said raw vegetables helped her arthritis. She filled her plate with lettuce and tomatoes, added some ranch dressing, and sat in her usual booth by the window. By 9 a.m., we had our usual breakfast crowd. About 15 people, most ordered eggs and pancakes, but 5 or 6 used the salad bar. Everything seemed normal. Coffee was flowing, orders were coming out hot, and I was restocking the crouton container when Mrs. Peterson called me over. "Maria, honey," she said, her face pale and sweaty. "I don't feel so good. My stomach is cramping up something awful." I brought her some water and asked if she wanted me to call someone. She said no, just needed to get home. But as she stood up, she doubled over in pain. That's when Mr. Harris, another salad bar customer, rushed past us toward the bathroom, holding his stomach. Within an hour, 3 more customers who'd eaten from the salad bar were sick. Really sick. Vomiting, cramping, sweating. I called Danny, the owner, and he told me to close the salad bar immediately. We threw out everything and scrubbed it down with bleach. But it was too late. By noon, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Customers calling to say they were sick. Their families were sick. Some were heading to the hospital. Danny showed up, panicking, talking about lawsuits and health inspectors. "Maria, you sure you followed all the food safety rules?" he asked, sweat beading on his forehead. "Of course I did," I said. "Same as always. Everything was fresh. I checked the temperatures. I used the sanitizer solution." But doubt crept in. Had I missed something? Left something out too long? Used contaminated gloves? The health department inspector arrived at 2 p.m., a serious woman named Janet Collins who examined every inch of our kitchen. She took samples of everything, leftover salad ingredients, cutting boards, even the sanitizer solution. She questioned me for an hour about our procedures. "When did you last clean the salad bar containers?" she asked. "Yesterday night, like always. Wash, rinse, sanitize." "Where do you store the vegetables?" "Walk-in cooler, 38 degrees, I check it every morning." "Who has access to the salad bar area?" That question stuck with me. During prep time, it was just me. But during service, any employee could walk past it. Our cook, Jimmy, our other server, Linda, and we'd hired 2 new employees last month, quiet people who kept to themselves. Janet shut us down pending investigation. As I locked up that afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Food poisoning doesn't hit 15 people from one salad bar in 3 hours. Not unless something made it happen. The next morning, I woke up to sirens. Ambulances racing down my street toward the hospital. I turned on the radio and heard something that made my blood run cold. Salem General Hospital is reporting over 100 cases of severe food poisoning. Emergency rooms are overcrowded. Health officials are investigating multiple restaurants across the city. Multiple restaurants. This wasn't just Danny's Diner. I drove downtown and saw restaurants closed everywhere. Big signs in windows, closed by health department. Police cars outside some places. At the hospital, I saw ambulances lined up, people on stretchers being wheeled inside. I called Janet Collins, the health inspector. Maria? Good, I was going to call you. We need to talk. This is bigger than your restaurant. We met at the health department. Janet looked like she hadn't slept. Maps covered her desk, red pins marking affected restaurants. Danny's was just one of 12 restaurants hit. All salad bars, Janet said. Every single one. Over 750 people sick so far. This isn't random food poisoning. Someone did this on purpose. On purpose, who would poison people? We don't know yet. But we found the same strain of salmonella bacteria at every location. It's not natural. Someone grew this in a lab. My hands started shaking. Someone had deliberately poisoned the food I served to my customers, people I knew, neighbors, friends. Janet, I need to know, did someone get into our salad bar? Did someone on my staff do this? She leaned forward. Maria, have you heard of a group called the Rajneeshis? I hadn't heard that name before. But Janet explained everything. About 90 minutes east of Salem, near a town called Antelope, there was a huge compound called Rajneeshpuram. Thousands of people lived there, following an Indian guru named Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. They wore red and orange clothes, meditated for hours, and believed their leader was enlightened. Sounds like hippies, I said. These aren't hippies, Janet replied. They've taken over the entire town of Antelope. Changed the name to Rajneesh. They have their own police force, their own government. And they're trying to take control of the whole county. She showed me newspaper clippings, photos of people in robes, armed guards, buildings that looked like a small city. The compound had its own airstrip, fire department, even a hotel. Thousands of followers from around the world lived there. Elections are coming up in November, Janet continued. County commissioner seats. If they win, they control all the local government, all the permits, all the law enforcement, everything. What does this have to do with the food poisoning? We think they're trying to make voters too sick to vote, especially voters who would vote against them. I stared at the photos. Normal-looking people, smiling, holding hands. They didn't look like terrorists. Janet, that's crazy. These people meditate and grow vegetables. They don't poison salad bars. But even as I said it, I remembered something. Our 2 new employees, the quiet ones, Sarah and Michael. They always wore orange or red shirts. Never ate meat. Always seemed to be watching everything, taking notes on little pieces of paper. Janet, I said slowly, I think some of them work at our restaurant. Janet connected me with FBI agent Williams, a tall man with tired eyes who'd been investigating the Rajneeshis for months. We met at a coffee shop away from downtown. Maria, we need your help, he said. We know the cult members have infiltrated restaurants across Oregon. They're working as cooks, servers, food prep workers. We need to know everything about your co-workers Sarah and Michael. I told him everything I could remember. Sarah worked food prep, came in early like me. Michael was a server but often helped restock the salad bar. Both had started working just before the poisoning. Both asked lots of questions about our procedures, our schedules, when we were busiest. They said they were from California, I told Agent Williams. Looking for a simpler life in Oregon. They were good workers, never caused problems. Where are they now? Haven't seen them since we closed. Danny can't reach them. Their phone numbers don't work. Agent Williams nodded grimly. They're probably back at the compound. Maria, what I'm about to tell you has to stay between us. We believe this salmonella attack is just the beginning. We have sources inside Rajneeshpuram who say the leadership is planning something much worse. My coffee grew cold as he explained. The cult had laboratories where they grew bacteria. They'd been experimenting with different biological weapons for months. They'd even tested some on homeless people they'd bust in from other cities, telling them they were offering free meals and medical care. The salmonella was a test run, Agent Williams said. They want to see if they can make thousands of people sick without getting caught. If it works, they're planning to contaminate the water supply of major cities right before the election. Water supply? That could kill people. That's the idea. They see anyone outside their group as enemies, obstacles to their spiritual mission. They believe they're saving the world by removing people who don't follow their guru. I felt sick, not from salmonella, but from the realization that I'd been working alongside people who wanted to kill innocent families. People like Mrs. Peterson, who just wanted her coffee and breakfast salad to help with her arthritis. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside my apartment made me jump. Car doors, slamming, footsteps in the hallway. What if Sarah and Michael knew I was talking to the FBI? What if other cult members were watching me? I started noticing things I'd missed before. The red pickup truck that seemed to be parked on my street every morning. The woman in orange clothes at the grocery store who stared at me. The way my phone sometimes had strange clicking sounds when I made calls. Agent Williams had warned me that the Rajneeshis had sophisticated surveillance equipment. They wiretapped government offices, followed local politicians, and kept detailed files on anyone they saw as a threat. If they knew I was helping the investigation, I could be in real danger. The next day, I drove past Danny's diner. Still closed, yellow tape across the door. A small memorial of flowers had appeared on the sidewalk, people remembering neighbors who'd gotten sick from our salad bar. Mrs. Peterson's daughter had left a note. My mom is still in the hospital. Why would someone do this to innocent people? I knew the answer now, but it didn't make sense. How does meditation and spiritual enlightenment lead to poisoning families? How does following a guru turn normal people into bioterrorists? Agent Williams called that afternoon. Maria, we need you to identify some people. Can you come to the federal building? He showed me surveillance photos taken near the compound. Hundreds of faces. On the 5th page, I found them. Sarah and Michael, wearing the distinctive red robes, standing with a group near some laboratory buildings. That's them, I said. But they look different. Happier, maybe. More confident. Cult conditioning, Agent Williams explained. They believe they're doing sacred work, fighting a holy war against people who don't understand their enlightenment. He showed me more photos, armed guards patrolling the compound, weapons, stockpiles, laboratory equipment. A photo of a woman with short, dark hair and intense eyes. That's Ma Anand Sheila, he said, the cult's second in command. She runs the day-to-day operations while the guru meditates. Our sources say she personally ordered the salmonella attacks. Looking at her photo, I felt a chill. She looked like someone's aunt or neighbor. Normal, human. But she'd orchestrated the poisoning of 750 innocent people as if she were planning a dinner party. Agent Williams spread out maps of Oregon. Red marks showed Rajneeshi infiltration, ISS, restaurants, government offices, hospitals, schools. There were more marks than I'd imagined. They've been planning this for 2 years, he said. The goal is to control Oregon politics, then expand to other states. They want to create a Rajneeshi nation within America. He pointed to marks near water treatment facilities. November 6th is election day. 3 days before, they plan to contaminate the water supplies in Portland, Eugene, and Salem. Not with salmonella this time. With something deadlier. What? Anthrax. They've been growing it in their labs for months. I stared at the maps, trying to understand the scale of what they were planning. Hundreds of thousands of people could die. Entire cities poisoned. Also, a guru and his followers could control local elections. Can't you just arrest them? We're trying. But they have spies and law enforcement. Every time we plan a raid, they know about it in advance. Some of our own agents might be compromised. That's when I realized how isolated we were. If the FBI couldn't trust their own people, who could stop this? How do you fight an enemy that's already inside your police departments, your government offices, your restaurants? Agent Williams, what if they know I'm talking to you? He was quiet for a long moment. Maria, I won't lie to you. If they know, you're in danger. These people have attempted assassination before. They don't hesitate to kill people who threaten their mission. 2 weeks later, everything changed. Agent Williams called me at 5 a.m. Maria, we're moving today. Some cult members inside the compound want to escape, and they're willing to testify about the bioterror plans. We finally have enough evidence for arrests. By noon, federal agents were surrounding Rajneeshpuram. Helicopters circled overhead. Armed agents moved through the compound, arresting leaders and securing the laboratories. I watched the news coverage from my apartment, seeing Sarah and Michael led away in handcuffs along with dozens of others. The guru himself, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, was arrested at an airport trying to flee the country. But the most shocking arrest was Ma Anand Sheela, the woman who'd ordered the poisoning of my customers, who'd planned to kill hundreds of thousands with anthrax, looked calm and defiant as agents put her in a police car. The news reported what they found in the compound laboratories, not just salmonella and anthrax, but other biological weapons. Plans to poison not just Oregon, but major cities across the country. Lists of government officials marked for assassination. The trials lasted months. Ma Anand Sheela was convicted of attempted murder, assault, and conspiracy. She got 20 years in federal prison, but was released after serving only 4 years. 4 years for poisoning 750 people and planning to kill hundreds of thousands more. Sarah and Michael, my former co-workers, testified that they'd been told the salmonella attacks were spiritual warfare against people too ignorant to understand enlightenment. They served 2 years each and disappeared after their release. Danny's diner never reopened. Danny couldn't afford the legal costs and lost his insurance. The building is still empty, with 4 rent signs that nobody answers. Mrs. Peterson recovered, but she never trusted restaurant food again. She told me she still has nightmares about that morning when her breakfast salad nearly killed her. I work at a different restaurant now, in a different city. But I've never forgotten what I learned during those terrifying weeks in 1984. First, evil doesn't always look evil. Sarah and Michael seemed like normal co-workers. Ma Anand Sheela looked like someone's grandmother. The Rajneeshis thought they were saving the world, which made them more dangerous than criminals who know they're doing wrong. Second, our food system is incredibly vulnerable. A few people with basic laboratory knowledge can poison thousands of people in a single day. We trust that the person preparing our food wants to help us, not hurt us. But that trust can be weaponized. Third, terrorism isn't always bombs and guns. Sometimes it's invisible bacteria in your salad. Sometimes it's people who smile and take your order while planning to kill you for their cause. The Rajneeshpuram bioterror attack was the largest in U.S. history, but most people have never heard of it. The cult members who carried it out have been released from prison. Some are probably living normal lives, working normal jobs, pretending that September 1984 never happened. But I remember, every time I restock a salad bar, every time I train a new employee, every time someone asks me why I'm so careful about food safety procedures, I remember because 750 people got sick from food I helped serve, and it could have been so much worse. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if there are other cults out there, other true believers planning their own spiritual warfare. Other normal-looking people who think poisoning innocent families is a sacred duty. I hope I'm wrong, but I stay vigilant, because the next time someone tries to poison a city, I want to be ready to stop them. The salad bar attacks taught America that domestic terrorism comes in many forms, that spiritual movements can become killing machines, that ordinary workplaces can become battlegrounds in wars we never knew we were fighting. My name is Maria Santos, and I survived the poisoned city. I'm telling you this story because vigilance is the only defense we have against people who believe their enlightenment gives them the right to murder strangers. Stay alert, trust carefully, and never forget that evil often comes disguised as salvation. My name is Robert Martinez, and for 12 years I thought I knew what fear was. Working night shifts as a janitor, you see things. Blood on operating room floors, patients screaming in their sleep. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I discovered at Oregon State Hospital during the winter of 2019. I'm not telling you this story to scare you. I'm telling you because what I found in that building is still happening right now, and someone needs to know the truth before more people disappear. Oregon State Hospital sits on Center Street in Salem, like a red brick monument to human suffering. Built in 1883, it's where Oregon has been hiding its darkest secrets for over a century. The official story says they stopped performing lobotomies in 1967. The official story is a lie. I started working there in February 2019. My supervisor Janet gave me the tour on my first day. A heavy-set woman with dead eyes who spoke like she was reading from a script. "You clean floors 1 through 3, she said, her keys jangling as we walked. Basement storage and medical records. The 4th and 5th floors are sealed off. Asbestos remediation. Don't go up there." She handed me a walkie-talkie and a ring of keys. "Your shift is 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. You work alone. You don't talk to patients. You don't read medical files. You clean and you leave. Questions?" I should have asked why she looked so scared when she said it. The first 2 weeks were normal. I'd start on the ground floor, work my way up, hit the basement last. The building was mostly quiet except for the overnight nursing staff and the occasional patient having a nightmare. Standard hospital cleaning, to mop the floors, empty the trash, sanitize the bathrooms. Then I met Marcus Williams. He was a patient on the 2nd floor, maybe 30 years old, with the kind of manic energy that made the nurses keep their distance. During my first week, I'd see him through his door window, pacing, talking to himself, occasionally screaming at whoever walked by. The nurses said he was bipolar with violent tendencies, admitted by his family after he attacked his sister during a psychotic episode. Marcus was what the staff called a problem patient. The kind who threw food, refused medication, and made everyone's life difficult. But Marcus was also smart, articulate. When he wasn't having an episode, he'd press his face against the door window and try to talk to anyone who would listen. "They're not trying to help us," he told me one night through the reinforced glass. "They're waiting for us to break so they can fix us their way." I figured it was just paranoid rambling. That was my first mistake. On March 15th, everything changed. I was cleaning the 2nd floor around 2 a.m. when I heard the sound that would haunt me for the rest of my life. It came from somewhere above, a high-pitched whirring, like a dental drill, followed by the most horrific scream I've ever heard. Not the scream of someone having a nightmare. The scream of someone in unimaginable physical agony. I grabbed my walkie-talkie. "Janet, you hear that? Sounds like someone's hurt upstairs." Static. Then, "Hear what, Robert? Everything's quiet on my end." But the screaming continued for another 10 seconds before cutting off abruptly, leaving only the hum of fluorescent lights and my own racing heartbeat. The next morning, I checked on Marcus. His room was empty. When I asked the day nurse where he went, she said he'd been transferred to a specialized facility for advanced treatment. But I'd seen the patient transport log. No one had left the building. That's when I started paying attention. 3 nights later, I heard the drilling again. This time, I was ready. I took the service elevator to the 3rd floor, 2-9, the one Janet said was sealed for asbestos removal. The elevator opened onto a hallway that definitely wasn't abandoned. Fresh wheel marks in the dust, recent footprints. And at the end of the hall, light spilling from under a door. I crept toward the light, my heart hammering against my ribs. As I got closer, I could hear voices, medical terminology, instructions for surgical procedures, and underneath it all, the quiet whimpering of someone trying not to scream. I pressed my ear against the door and heard a man's voice, calm and professional. The transorbital approach requires precision. We insert the leucotome 2 centimeters above the orbital socket and sweep laterally to sever the connections between the frontal cortex and the thalamus. My blood turned to ice water. That was lobotomy terminology. I'd researched it after finding some old medical texts in the basement. But lobotomies were banned. They were history. Medieval torture disguised as medicine. I tried the door handle. Locked. But there was a supply closet across the hall with a window facing the same direction. Using my master key, I slipped inside and peered through the grimy glass. What I saw shattered everything I thought I knew about reality. The room had been converted into a fully functional operating theater. Bright surgical lights illuminated a figure strapped to a metal table, and standing over them, wearing blood-stained surgical scrubs, was a man I recognized from the old photographs in the hospital lobby, Dr. Walter Freeman, the father of the lobotomy. The man who had personally performed over 3,400 ice-pick lobotomies before the procedure was banned in the 1,960 seconds. The man who had supposedly died in 1972. But there he was, very much alive, sliding a thin metal spike through a patient's eye socket while they writhed in agony. The patient's face was turned toward me, and even through the restraints and the blood, I could see it was Marcus Williams. Freeman twisted the spike with practiced precision, scrambling the frontal lobe like he was stirring eggs. Marcus's screaming cut off mid-breath, and the body went limp. His eyes, which had been wild with terror just seconds before, became empty, vacant, like someone had just turned off the lights inside his skull. I stumbled backward, knocking over a mop bucket. The crash echoed through the empty hallway like a gunshot. The drilling stopped. The voices went silent. Through the window, I saw Freeman's head snap toward the door, his ice-blue eyes scanning for the source of the sound. I ran. Down the stairs, through the hallways, my footsteps echoing like thunder in the empty building. I didn't stop until I was locked in the janitor's closet on the ground floor, gasping for air and trying to convince myself that what I'd seen was impossible. But the next day, Marcus was back in his room. Only it wasn't really Marcus anymore. He sat on his bed in perfect stillness, staring at the wall with those same empty eyes I'd seen in Freeman's operating room. When the nurses brought his food, he ate mechanically, without expression. When they spoke to him, he didn't respond. His family came to visit that weekend. Through the observation window, I watched his sister crying as she tried to get him to recognize her. Marcus looked right through her like she wasn't there. The nurse explained that he was responding well to new medication and that his violent tendencies had been successfully managed. They left believing their brother was getting better. They had no idea his personality had been surgically removed. That night, I started investigating. I began in the basement records room, looking for any trace of what was really happening. What I found was a hidden archive that wasn't supposed to exist. Behind a false wall in the old file storage area, I discovered rooms full of patient records dating back to the 1,940 seconds. Not the sanitized files that families saw, but the real documentation of Oregon State Hospital's secret lobotomy program. The scope of it was staggering. Over 2,600 lobotomies performed between 1,943 and 1,967. Men, women, and children as young as 11 years old. Most weren't even mentally ill. They were homosexuals, unwed mothers, political radicals, or just inconvenient family members that someone wanted to get rid of. But the most horrifying discovery was that the program had never stopped. I found recent files documenting procedures from 2018 and 2019, patients admitted for depression or anxiety, then selected for experimental treatment based on their behavior and family situation. The lobotomies were disguised as deep brain stimulation therapy, or minimally invasive mood regulation procedures. The families never knew. They were told their loved ones were receiving cutting-edge psychiatric treatment. Death certificates listed false causes when procedures went wrong. Patients who survived but were too damaged to function were kept in hidden basement cells, out of sight from family visits. And orchestrating it all was Dr. Walter Freeman himself. I found his personal files in a locked cabinet. Medical records showing he'd been secretly kept alive through experimental treatments since the 1,970 seconds. Photographs of him performing procedures decade after decade, barely aging, sustained by some unholy combination of medical science and pure malevolence. The man had turned lobotomy into an art form. He'd developed new techniques, faster methods, ways to destroy specific aspects of personality while leaving others intact. He could make violent patients docile while preserving their motor functions. He could eliminate homosexual impulses while maintaining heterosexual attraction. He could erase political beliefs while leaving job skills intact. But the worst part was the financial records. Oregon State Hospital was selling these services to wealthy families across the country. Parents who wanted their gay children fixed. Spouses who wanted difficult partners adjusted. Politicians who wanted inconvenient opponents treated. The going rate for a custom lobotomy was $50,000. Cash only. no questions asked. I photographed everything I could, but when I tried to show the evidence to anyone, it would disappear. Pictures deleted from my phone, files vanishing from my locker. Even the copies I made would somehow get destroyed before I could share them. That's when I realized the cover-up went beyond the hospital. The state health department, local law enforcement, media outlets, they were all part of it, either bought off or threatened into silence. For 3 weeks, I tried to find someone who would listen. Every attempt was blocked. Every lead went nowhere. I was starting to think I was going insane when I found the intake form with my name on it. It was in Freeman's office, which I'd finally managed to break into using stolen security codes. There, on his desk, was a patient admission form filled out in his spidery handwriting. Asterisk, Robert Martinez. Age 35. Occupation, hospital maintenance, asterisk, presenting issues. Paranoid delusions, making unfounded accusations against hospital staff, exhibiting obsessive behavior regarding facility operations. Asterisk, recommended treatment. Bilateral prefrontal lobotomy to address paranoid ideation and reduce aggressive tendencies. Asterisk, family consent, not required. Patient has no next of kin, estranged from relatives, asterisk, procedure date. The 3rd of April 2019 times. Today was April 2nd. I was scheduled to be lobotomized tomorrow night. I ran home, threw everything I owned into my car, and drove straight to Portland. I didn't stop driving until I reached the California border. For 6 months, I lived in constant fear, jumping at every shadow, convinced Freeman's people were hunting me. But eventually, I realized something. They didn't need to hunt me. Who was going to believe a night janitor's story about a century-old doctor performing secret lobotomies? I had no evidence, no witnesses, no proof. I was the perfect victim because I was nobody. Now, it's 2024, and Oregon State Hospital is still operating. They still advertise their innovative treatment programs and breakthrough therapeutic techniques. Families still bring their troubled loved ones there, believing they'll get help. But sometimes, late at night, I drive back to Salem and park across from the hospital. I can see lights in the 4th and 5th floors, the ones that are supposed to be sealed for asbestos removal. I can hear the faint sound of drilling carried on the wind. Last month, I saw a news report about a breakthrough in treating violent mental illness at Oregon State Hospital. They interviewed Dr. Freeman, looking exactly the same as he did in 2019, talking about their 95% success rate in eliminating aggressive behaviors. They showed before and after footage of patients. In the before videos, the patients were animated, emotional, human. In the after footage, they sat quietly, responded to simple commands, and stared at nothing with empty eyes. The reporter called it a miracle of modern medicine. I called it what it really was, mass murder of the human soul. If someone you love is ever admitted to Oregon State Hospital, don't believe the success stories. Don't trust the statistics. Visit them every single day, and if they suddenly become calm and docile overnight, demand to see exactly what treatment they received. Because once Dr. Freeman gets his hands on them, the person you knew will never come back. All that will remain is a breathing shell with your loved one's face, programmed to be the perfect patient until the day they die. The screams I heard in 2019 weren't echoes from the past. They were happening in real time. And somewhere in that red brick building on Center Street, they're still happening right now. Dr. Walter Freeman is still alive. The lobotomies never stopped, and Oregon's darkest secret is hiding in plain sight, one destroyed mind at a time. Don't let them tell you this is fiction. Don't let them convince you it's ancient history. The ice pick lobotomy is alive and well in Oregon, and your family could be next. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been a volunteer with Mount Hood Search and Rescue for 8 years. I started when I was 24, fresh out of college with a degree I wasn't using and too much time on my hands. What began as weekend volunteer work became my life's calling. I've pulled lost hikers out of crevasses, found missing kids in the wilderness, and recovered bodies that families needed to say goodbye to. In those 8 years, I thought I'd seen everything Mount Hood could throw at me. I was wrong. Mount Hood isn't just any mountain. She's a sleeping volcano, 11,249 feet of ice, rock, and weather that can kill you in a dozen different ways. The locals respect her. The tourists underestimate her. And the experienced climbers? They know she's alive, breathing, watching every step they take on her slopes. I've made over 200 rescues on that mountain. Broken bones, hypothermia, altitude sickness, avalanche victims. I've seen grown men cry when we found them, and I've held the hands of people who didn't make it home. But what happened during the search for the Brennan party last February changed everything I thought I knew about that mountain, and about what lives up there in those frozen peaks. February 14th, Valentine's Day. I was eating dinner alone when my radio crackled to life. All available SAR volunteers, we have a code red situation. 3 missing climbers, experienced party, overdue 48 hours. The Brennan party, David Brennan, 34, a software engineer from Portland. Sarah Chen, 29, a nurse who'd climbed Denali twice. Marcus Williams, 31, a professional mountain guide with over 15 years' experience. These weren't weekend warriors who got in over their heads. These were people who knew what they were doing. They'd filed a climbing plan for a 4-day winter ascent via the South Side route. Standard stuff for experienced climbers in February. Their emergency beacon had sent a distress signal 2 days ago from around 9,800 feet, then went silent. No radio contact, no cell phone signal, nothing. I threw my gear in my truck and drove to the base station through a blizzard that was getting worse by the hour. The wind was howling at 60 miles per hour with gusts hitting 100. The temperature was 15 below zero, and that was at the bottom of the mountain. Randy Hopkins, our team leader, was coordinating the rescue. 20-year veteran, helicopter pilot in the Army, the kind of guy who stayed calm when everything went to hell. But when I walked into the command tent, I could see worry lines on his face that weren't usually there. "Weather's got us grounded," he said, pointing at the satellite images on his laptop. "Helicopters can't fly in this. We're going up on foot, but visibility is maybe 10 feet. It's going to be a ground search in whiteout conditions." 6 of us geared up for the ascent. Me, Randy, Lisa Torres, our medic, and 3 other volunteers. We'd climb to their last known position, find their shelter, and hopefully find them alive inside waiting for rescue. Simple plan. Should have been routine. The storm hit us the moment we left treeline. The wind was so strong it knocked me sideways every few steps. Snow wasn't falling, it was flying horizontally like frozen bullets. My goggles kept icing over. The GPS barely worked. We roped together and climbed blind, following our compasses and hoping we were going the right way. It took us 6 hours to climb what should have been a 3-hour route. When we finally reached 9,800 feet, we found their camp. The snow cave was perfect. Professionally built, reinforced walls, proper ventilation. David, Sarah, and Marcus knew what they were doing. But the cave was empty. Not just empty. Abandoned in a hurry. Their sleeping bags were still there, but unzipped and thrown aside. Food scattered on the floor. A camp stove knocked over, fuel spilled and frozen. Their extra clothes were still in the packs, but their boots were gone. In a February blizzard at 9,800 feet, they'd left their shelter wearing only the clothes on their backs. Something spooked them, Lisa said, kneeling next to a torn sleeping bag. Something made them run. I was checking their gear when I found the blood. Dark stains on the snow cave floor, already frozen solid. Not a lot, but enough to know someone was hurt. I followed the blood trail outside and found more spots in the snow, leading uphill. Away from safety. Away from the route down. "Randy," I called over the radio. "We've got blood trail leading northeast." They left camp and went higher. Randy's voice crackled back through the static. "That doesn't make sense. Why would experienced climbers go up in a storm?" I was thinking the same thing. In a blizzard, you hunker down, you wait it out. You don't abandon your shelter and climb higher into worse weather. Unless something inside that cave scared you more than dying in the storm. We found the first piece of clothing 50 yards from camp. Sarah's jacket, torn and bloody. Then Marcus's glove, shredded like something with claws had ripped it off his hand. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same impossible conclusion. Something had attacked 3 experienced climbers in their shelter, and they'd fled into a blizzard rather than fight it. By the 3rd day, we had 12 people on the mountain. SAR teams from 3 counties, volunteer climbers, even a couple of off-duty Forest Service rangers. The storm had passed, but the temperature was still 20 below, and the wind hadn't stopped. I was checking a ravine about 200 yards from their original camp when I found the tracks. They were in a sheltered spot where the wind hadn't blown the snow around. 4 distinct sets of human footprints, all wearing mountaineering boots. 3 of them matched the missing climber's gear. The 4th set was different. Bigger. Much bigger. I knelt down to get a better look. The 4th set of tracks wasn't made by any boots I'd ever seen. They were roughly foot-shaped, but at least size 18, maybe 20. Deep impressions, like whatever made them weighed a lot more than a human. And they were barefoot in 20 below weather. The tracks followed the climber's trail for about 100 yards, then veered off toward a cliff face. I followed them, my heart pounding harder with each step. The prints led to a crack in the rock face, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The opening disappeared into darkness. I called Randy on the radio. "I found tracks. You need to see this." When the team gathered around the prints, nobody said anything for a long time. Finally, Randy pulled out his measuring tape. 18 inches long, 7 inches wide. Whatever made these tracks weighs at least 300 pounds. "Could be a bear," Lisa suggested, but her voice didn't sound convinced. "Bears don't walk upright for 100 yards, I said. "And they hibernate in winter. Besides, look at the stride length. This thing has legs like a basketball player." We spent 2 hours searching the area around the crack in the rocks. No more tracks, no blood, no equipment. Whatever went through that opening had vanished. That night, back at base camp, I started researching. I called every wildlife expert I knew. I checked with the Forest Service about unusual animal sightings. I even called my uncle, who'd been hunting these mountains for 40 years. What I found made my blood run cold. Mount Hood has been claiming lives for over 150 years. The official records list avalanches, falls, exposure, equipment failure, standard mountain climbing dangers. But when you dig deeper, when you read the witness statements and survivor accounts, a different picture emerges. In 1952, a climbing party of 5 experienced mountaineers vanished near the summit. One survivor was found 3 days later, frostbitten and delirious. He kept talking about the tall ones and claimed something had stalked their camp for 2 nights before attacking. The official report listed the cause as an avalanche, but no avalanche debris was ever found. In 1967, a search and rescue volunteer named Tom Bradley disappeared while looking for missing climbers. His body was found 2 weeks later in an impossible location inside an ice cave system that had no known entrance. The coroner couldn't determine cause of death. No injuries, no signs of exposure. He'd just stopped living. In 1981, a group of college students reported being chased by a huge figure that walked upright and made no sound moving through snow. They barely made it back to their camp alive. Park Service dismissed it as hysteria and alcohol. The pattern was always the same: experienced climbers disappearing in good weather, search teams finding evidence of panic, abandoned camps, gear scattered like people had fled in terror. Bodies found in impossible locations or not found at all. And always, witnesses describing something tall, powerful, and intelligent, stalking the high peaks. I found 23 cases over 60 years, 23 times when skilled mountaineers had encountered something on Mount Hood that shouldn't exist. The Native American tribes who lived here before the settlers had a name for it: Stay-Yee-Haw, the giant of the mountain. They said it guarded the high peaks and killed anyone who trespassed on sacred ground. The government knew too. I found classified Forest Service memos from the 1,970 seconds discussing anomalous wildlife reports and unexplained climbing fatalities. Military search teams had been deployed to Mount Hood 3 times since Valentides, 1,960, always with orders to investigate special biological concerns. On the 4th day of the search, we found Marcus. He was hanging upside down from a tree at 10,500 feet, 30 feet off the ground. His body was frozen solid, and he'd been dead for at least 2 days. But it was how he died that made 2 of our volunteers quit the search and drive straight home. Marcus Williams was a 200-pound man who could deadlift 400 pounds and climb frozen waterfalls for fun. Whatever killed him had torn him apart like tissue paper. The medical examiner later said the claw marks were from something with hands the size of dinner plates. But Marcus had fought back. Clutched in his frozen fingers was a piece of dark brown hair, coarse as steel wool. The hair was tested at 3 different labs. It didn't match any known animal in North America. It didn't match any known animal anywhere. We also found Marcus's camera. The memory card was intact, and what we saw in those final photos changed everything. The last picture was taken at 11:47 p.m. on February 15th. It showed something standing at the edge of their camp's light. Something tall, covered in dark hair, with eyes that reflected the camera flash like an animal's. But the face was wrong. Too human. Too intelligent. The look in those eyes wasn't animal instinct. It was calculated, patient, like it was studying them. The photo before that showed David and Sarah huddled in their sleeping bags, both staring toward the cave entrance with expressions of pure terror. The timestamp was 11:46 p.m. 1 minute before the creature showed itself. I counted 14 photos taken over the span of 3 hours that night. All of them showed the thing getting closer to their shelter, circling their camp, testing their defenses. In the early photos, it was just a shadow at the edge of the light. By the final shots, it was close enough to touch their tent. We found David 2 days later, in a crevasse half a mile from Marcus's body. He'd fallen 40 feet onto a ledge and couldn't climb out. He was still alive when we reached him, but barely. Hypothermia, frostbite, 3 broken ribs, and a shattered leg. He should have died in that ice cave days ago, but somehow he'd survived. David was conscious but delirious when we pulled him out. He kept muttering about the eyes in the storm and begging us not to let it find him. Even with painkillers and warming blankets, he wouldn't stop looking over his shoulder. The medical team stabilized him enough for helicopter evacuation, but before they loaded him on the stretcher, he grabbed my arm with what little strength he had left. "It's still up there," he whispered. "It's still hunting. Don't let them send anyone else up the mountain." I never saw David Brennan again. The official report said he died of complications from hypothermia 2 days later in the hospital. But I heard from a nurse friend that David's last words were about something tall and dark standing outside his hospital room window. On the 4th floor, we never found Sarah Chen. The search officially ended after 7 days. The Forest Service released a statement about a tragic climbing accident caused by severe weather conditions. The families were told their loved ones had died in an avalanche. The media moved on to other stories. But our SAR team knew the truth. We'd seen the photos, we'd measured the tracks, we'd found the hair samples and the claw marks. 3 experienced climbers had encountered something that shouldn't exist, and 2 of them had died fighting it. Randy Hopkins resigned as team leader a month later. He'd been doing search and rescue for 20 years, but after Mount Hood, he couldn't bring himself to go back up the mountain. Lisa Torres transferred to a team in the Cascades. Half our volunteers quit within 6 months. I stayed, but I never looked at Mount Hood the same way again. Every missing person call, every overdue climber report, I wondered if we were sending good people to their deaths. I started carrying extra ammunition in my pack, even though I knew bullets probably wouldn't stop whatever lived up there. The Forest Service quietly changed their climbing permit requirements. Now, they strongly discourage winter ascents above 9,000 feet. They installed new weather monitoring equipment and emergency shelters. But I know the real reason. They're trying to keep people away from the hunting grounds. 3 months after the Brennan party disappeared, I got a visit from 2 men in dark suits who claimed to work for the Department of Agriculture. They wanted to discuss my observations during the search. They had copies of my reports, photos I'd never shared with anyone, and detailed knowledge of everything we'd found on the mountain. They offered me a job. Good money, federal benefits, a chance to help manage human-wildlife conflicts in sensitive areas. All I had to do was sign some papers agreeing to keep certain information confidential and relocate to a research facility in Colorado. I turned them down. A week later, my employer, a local outdoor gear company, let me go due to budget constraints. My landlord sold the building and didn't renew my lease. My truck started having mysterious mechanical problems that no mechanic could fix. The message was clear. Take the job or have your life made very difficult. I took the job. For 2 years, I worked at a government facility that officially didn't exist, monitoring anomalous biological activity in wilderness areas across the Pacific Northwest. I learned that Mount Hood wasn't unique. There were things living in the deep woods and high mountains that the government had been tracking for decades. Things that were intelligent, territorial, and dangerous to human beings who wandered too far into their domain. The program had a 90% mortality rate among field researchers. I quit after my partner disappeared during a routine survey in Olympic National Park. The official cause of death was a bear attack, but I'd seen the security footage. Bears don't stand 9 feet tall. I'm back to civilian life now, working construction in Portland and trying to forget what I learned in those 2 years. But I can't forget Sarah Chen. Somewhere up on Mount Hood, there might be evidence of what happened to her. Maybe her body, maybe her gear, maybe just another blood trail leading nowhere. The thing that killed Marcus Williams and David Brennan is still up there. It's still hunting, still patient, still intelligent enough to avoid our search teams and government monitoring stations. Climate change has been reducing snowpack on Mount Hood, which means more exposed terrain, more hiking trails, more opportunities for people to wander into territory they don't understand. Every year, 3 to 5 climbers disappear on Mount Hood. The official cause is always weather, equipment failure, or human error. The families get closure, the insurance companies pay out, and the Forest Service updates their safety recommendations. Nobody talks about the claw marks or the impossible tracks or the photos that never make it into the official reports. But I know the truth. And if you're planning to climb Mount Hood, especially the high peaks above 9,000 feet, you need to know it too. The mountain is alive. It's watching, and it doesn't like visitors. Sarah Chen went missing on February 16th, and I believe she's still up there somewhere. Maybe frozen in an ice cave, maybe scattered across the rocks by whatever caught her. But maybe, just maybe, she left some evidence behind. Some proof of what really hunts in those frozen peaks. I still have my gear. I still know those trails. And one day, when I'm ready to face whatever's waiting up there, I'm going back to find her. Even if it means becoming the next missing person report filed away in some government office where the truth goes to die. Mount Hood is patient. But so am I. And I owe Sarah Chen the truth, even if it kills me. My name is David Chen, and I've been working as a hospital orderly at St. Mary's Medical Center for 3 years. I push wheelchairs, move patients between rooms, and help nurses with whatever they need. It's not glamorous work, but I like helping people when they're scared and hurting. I've seen people die before. It's part of working in a hospital. But what I discovered about Nurse Patricia Williams during the winter of 2024 still keeps me awake at night. It started with something I noticed during my night shifts. I worked the graveyard shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., mostly on the 3rd and 4th floors where we keep the sickest patients. That's where people go when they're really sick or dying. I've always been good with numbers, so I started noticing patterns. On some nights, we'd lose 3 or 4 patients. On other nights, nobody died at all. At first, I thought it was just random. Death comes when it wants to, right? But then I started paying closer attention to which nurses were working when people died. And that's when I saw it. Almost every time we had multiple deaths in one night, Nurse Patricia was working. Patricia Williams had been at St. Mary's for about 2 years. She was in her mid-40s, always perfectly dressed, with blonde hair pulled back tight. She worked the night shift like me, but she was always volunteering for extra hours. While other nurses complained about being tired, Patricia seemed to have endless energy. The other nurses liked her. She was professional, knew her job, and never caused drama. But there was something about the way she smiled that made me uncomfortable. It was too wide, too perfect, like she was always thinking about something funny that nobody else knew about. The first time I really noticed something was wrong was on a Tuesday night in January. We had 3 patients die between midnight and 4 a.m. 2 were expected, they'd been sick for weeks. But the third one, Mr. Rodriguez, in room 304, we're supposed to go home the next day. Mr. Rodriguez had been recovering from a minor surgery, nothing serious. His family had even brought balloons to his room. But around 2 a.m., his monitors started going crazy. By the time the doctors got there, he was gone. I was restocking supplies in the hallway when I saw Patricia coming out of room 304. She looked happy. Not sad like the rest of us, not tired like you'd expect after losing a patient. She looked energized, like she'd just had great news. Poor Mr. Rodriguez, she said to me as she walked past. At least he didn't suffer. But the weird thing was, his family said he'd been feeling fine when they left at 8 p.m. How does someone go from fine to dead in 6 hours? Over the next few weeks, I started watching Patricia more carefully. I noticed she always volunteered for the terminal ward, the section where we keep patients who are dying. Most nurses try to avoid that assignment because it's depressing, but Patricia requested it. She also had this habit of staying late to check on patients. I'd see her going into rooms during her breaks, carrying her personal bag. She said she liked to pray with patients who were alone. It sounded nice, but something felt off. I started keeping track of the deaths on my phone. In February, we lost 12 patients on nights when Patricia worked, and only 3 patients on nights when she was off. The other nurses didn't seem to notice, but the numbers were clear to me. Then I found her journal. It was a Thursday night in March. Patricia had left her personal bag in the break room while she responded to an emergency. The bag was open, and I could see a small notebook inside. I knew I shouldn't look, but I couldn't help myself. I opened the notebook and started reading. It wasn't a normal journal. It was full of details about patients who had died. Not medical details, personal things. Last words, facial expressions, how long it took them to stop breathing. She wrote about which patients cried, which ones called for their mothers, which ones died quietly. The most disturbing part was how she wrote about it, like she was reviewing a movie or describing a beautiful sunset. She used words like peaceful and graceful and perfect. One entry made my stomach turn. Mrs. Thompson went beautifully tonight. She tried to fight it at first, but then she accepted my gift. Her eyes went soft, and she whispered, "Thank you," before she let go. She understood that I was helping her. They always do, in the end. Mrs. Thompson had died the week before. Her family said she'd been getting better. After finding the journal, I started watching Patricia even more carefully. I noticed she always carried medications in her personal bag, things that should have been locked up in the medication room. When I asked her about it, she said she was saving time by pre-preparing doses for her patients. But that wasn't how our system worked. We had strict rules about medication, storage, and distribution. No nurse was supposed to carry controlled substances in their personal belongings. I also noticed that healthy patients seemed to get sicker when Patricia was assigned to them. Mr. Williams in room 408 had been stable for days, but after one night with Patricia, he had a massive heart attack. The doctors couldn't explain it. A diabetic patient named Sarah Lopez had her blood sugar crash so badly she almost died. Patricia was the last person to check on her before it happened. When I looked at the medication records later, Sarah's insulin dose had been doubled from what the doctor ordered. But Patricia was smart. She always had explanations. She'd say patients must have hidden their conditions, or that their bodies were weaker than expected. The doctors believed her because she was professional and had good references from her previous hospitals. I started researching Patricia's work history. She'd worked at 4 different hospitals in 5 years, which seemed like a lot. I called a friend who worked at her previous hospital, Cedar Valley Medical Center, and asked about her. "Oh, Patricia Williams," my friend said. "Yeah, we had some concerns about her unit's mortality rate, but nothing was ever proven. She left before we could investigate properly." That's when I realized this wasn't just happening at St. Mary's. Patricia had been doing this for years, moving from hospital to hospital, leaving a trail of unexplained deaths behind her. I tried to bring my concerns to my supervisor, but I didn't have proof, just patterns and suspicions. My supervisor said Patricia was a dedicated nurse with excellent reviews, and that death was a normal part of hospital life. She told me to focus on my own job and stop gossiping about coworkers. But I couldn't stop. Every night, I watched Patricia go from room to room, carrying her bag, staying extra time with patients who didn't have family visiting. And every morning, some of those patients were dead. On April 15th, I decided to follow Patricia during her rounds. It was 3 a.m., and the hospital was quiet. I stayed far behind her, pretending to clean the hallways while watching her movements. She went into room 312, where an elderly man named Frank was recovering from pneumonia. He'd been improving and was scheduled to go home the next day. Through the partially open door, I watched Patricia check his IV line and then reach into her personal bag. She pulled out a syringe filled with clear liquid. As she prepared to inject it into his IV port, I stepped into the room. "What are you doing?" I asked. Patricia turned around slowly, still holding the syringe. For the first time since I'd known her, her perfect smile was gone. "David," she said calmly, "you shouldn't be here." "What's in the syringe?" I asked. She looked at Frank, who was sleeping peacefully, then back at me. "This man is suffering, he said. "Look at him. He's old, alone, and in pain. His lungs are failing. He's going to die anyway, probably within the year. I'm just helping him avoid months of agony." "He's getting better," I said. "The doctors said he can go home tomorrow." Patricia shook her head. "The doctors don't understand. I've been doing this for years, David. I know when someone is ready to let go. I'm not a killer. I'm an angel of mercy. I help people die with dignity instead of wasting away in pain." "That's not your choice to make," I said. Her smile returned, but it was different now. Cold. "Actually, it is. I'm the one here with them in their final moments. I'm the one who sees their suffering. And I'm the one with the knowledge and access to help them." She took a step toward Frank's foreline. I grabbed her wrist. "Don't," I said. She looked at my hand on her wrist, then into my eyes. "You have two choices, David. You can walk away and forget this happened, or you can try to stop me and see what happens to people who interfere with God's work." Patricia told me everything that night. How she'd killed over 30 patients across 4 hospitals. How she chose victims who were alone or had demanding families. How she'd perfected different methods: insulin overdoses for diabetics, morphine for the elderly, potassium chloride for quick heart attacks. She'd stolen medications for months, building up a supply of untraceable drugs. She kept detailed records of every death, including photographs that she took with a hidden camera. She called it her mercy portfolio. The worst part was how she justified it. She genuinely believed she was doing good work. She talked about ending suffering and helping people transition peacefully. She said the families always thanked her for being there during their loved ones' final moments, not knowing she'd caused those final moments. "I'm going to report you," I told her. Patricia laughed. "With what proof?" "My word against yours. I'm a respected nurse with excellent reviews. You're a hospital orderly with no medical training. Who do you think they'll believe?" She was right, and we both knew it. I spent the next week gathering evidence. I took photos of her journal when she left it unattended. I documented the medications she carried in her personal bag. I created a timeline showing the correlation between her shifts and patient deaths, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. Patricia was too careful, too professional. She'd convinced doctors and administrators at multiple hospitals that she was just unlucky with her assigned patients. Then I found out she was planning to leave St. Mary's. She'd applied for a job at Children's Hospital across town. The thought of her working with sick kids made me sick. On April 30th, I made copies of all my evidence and sent it to the police, the state medical board, and the hospital administration. I also sent it to a local news reporter who specialized in medical stories. 2 days later, Patricia was arrested at the hospital during her shift. Police found syringes, stolen medications, and her journal in her locker. They also found photographs of dying patients and a detailed plan for her next mercy mission at the Children's Hospital. Patricia Williams pled guilty to 12 counts of murder and was sentenced to life in prison. The investigation revealed she'd killed at least 43 patients across 5 hospitals over 6 years. She showed no remorse during her trial and continued to insist she was helping people. I had to testify about what I witnessed and how I gathered evidence. It was terrifying, but I knew those families deserved the truth about how their loved ones really died. St. Mary's implemented new medication tracking systems and security protocols. I was promoted to a patient advocate position, helping families navigate the hospital system. It's better work, but I still think about all the patients who might have lived if I'd spoken up sooner. I learned that evil doesn't always look like what you expect. Sometimes it looks like a dedicated nurse with perfect hair and a helpful smile. Sometimes it hides behind good intentions and professional credentials. If you ever work in healthcare, or if you have a loved one in the hospital, pay attention to the patterns. Trust your instincts, and remember that just because someone wears scrubs and saves lives doesn't mean they can't also take them. Patricia called herself an angel of mercy, but she was wrong about one thing. Real mercy doesn't come from deciding who lives and dies. It comes from fighting to keep people alive, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. That's the difference between healing and killing, and that's something I'll never forget. My name is Sandra Mills, and I've been working as a waitress at truck stops for 6 years now. Started when I was 18, right out of high school. Couldn't afford college, so I took the first job I could find. The Crossroads truck stop on Interstate 5 Inches, Oregon, became my second home. I worked the graveyard shift, here at 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., serving coffee and pie to truckers hauling loads across the country. You learn things working nights at a truck stop: how to spot the drivers who've been on the road too long, which ones tip well and which ones try to grab your hand when you pour their coffee, how to handle the drunks and the ones looking for more than just a meal. I thought I'd seen everything the highway could throw at me. I was wrong. What happened during the winter of last year changed everything I thought I knew about the truckers who rolled through our parking lot. It made me realize that some monsters don't hide under beds or in dark forests. Some monsters drive 18-wheelers and blend in perfectly with everyone else. And some of them had been hunting right under our noses for years. The Crossroads sits about 40 miles south of Portland, right where Highway 18 meets I-5. It's one of those classic truck stops: diesel pumps, a restaurant, a small convenience store, and a parking lot big enough for about 30 big rigs. We get steady traffic from drivers heading north to Seattle or south to California. Most are good people just trying to make a living. Our restaurant has 12 booths along the windows facing the parking lot, plus a counter with 8 stools. The kitchen stays open all night, serving everything from truck stop classics like chicken fried steak to simple burgers and fries. The coffee pot never empties, and we always have fresh pie: apple, cherry, and pecan mostly. I knew the layout like my own bedroom. Booth 7 in the corner had the best view of the entire parking lot. The register by the front door sometimes stuck if you didn't hit the right buttons. The coffee machine made a weird grinding noise every Tuesday that Jerry, our manager, kept saying he'd fix. The fluorescent light over booth 3 flickered constantly. Working nights meant dealing with all kinds. Some drivers were chatty, telling stories about weird cargo or crazy weather they'd driven through. Others barely spoke, just wanting their food and coffee before getting back on the road. You learn to read people quick in this job. Had to, for your own safety. Jerry trained me well when I started. Trust your gut, he always said. If someone makes you uncomfortable, you get Mac from the kitchen or call me. Don't try to handle trouble yourself. Jerry had worked truck stops for 20 years before buying the Crossroads. He knew the business inside and out. The money wasn't great, but the tips could be decent if you worked hard and treated people right. I was saving up for community college, taking a few classes during the day when I could. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work, and I was good at it. Then Carl started coming through. I first noticed him in September. Big guy, maybe 45, with graying hair and a beard that needed trimming, drove a blue Peterbilt with a refrigerated trailer. He always came through on the third Thursday of every month, usually around 2 in the morning. Carl wasn't rude or creepy like some drivers. He was actually polite, always said please and thank you, tipped 15% exactly, every time. He ordered the same thing: meatloaf dinner with mashed potatoes, green beans, and black coffee. No pie, no dessert. He always sat in booth 7, the corner booth with the best view of the parking lot. What struck me as odd was how he watched everything. Most truckers eat and get back on the road quick as they can. Time is money in their business. But Carl would sit there for almost an hour, nursing his coffee and watching the parking lot like he was studying it. He never bothered me or the other girls. Never made inappropriate comments or tried to flirt. If anything, he seemed interested in our work schedules. He'd ask casual questions like, "You always work nights?" or "Just you and the cook here overnight?" Nothing that seemed wrong at the time. By November, I started noticing a pattern. Carl always showed up when I was working alone with just Mac in the kitchen, never when Jenny or Lisa were on shift with me, just when it was me by myself handling the dining room. That's when I started paying attention to the news. The first story I saw was about a girl named Michelle Rodriguez. 22 years old, disappeared from a truck stop near Eugene. She'd been working the night shift, just like me. Security cameras showed her talking to a trucker around midnight. Then she was gone. They found her car still in the employee parking lot. A week later, another story. Sarah Chen, 19, vanished from a truck stop near the California border. Last seen talking to a friendly trucker who offered her a ride to town. Her coworkers said he seemed nice, polite even. By December, I'd counted 7 women missing from truck stops along I-5. All young, all working night shifts, all last seen with truckers. The police weren't connecting the cases yet. Different jurisdictions, different states. But I was seeing the pattern. I started looking at Carl differently during his December visit. Same routine, booth 7, meatloaf dinner, watching the parking lot. But now I noticed how his eyes tracked every movement outside, how he seemed to memorize which trucks parked where, how he asked Mac about our security cameras when he thought I wasn't listening. "Pretty quiet setup you got here," Carl had said to Mac. "Cameras working okay? Must be important for safety. Being out here alone at night." Mac, bless his heart, told him everything. How the cameras only covered the front entrance and cash register area. How the parking lot cameras had been broken for months and Jerry couldn't afford to fix them. How we only had one security guard who made rounds twice a night. I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I listened. That night, I went home and did research online. What I found made me sick. Long-haul truckers, it turns out, make perfect serial killers. They travel constantly, crossing state lines every day. They know the highways, the truck stops, the isolated areas where nobody goes. They can grab someone in Oregon and dump the body in Nevada. Different states mean different police departments that don't always talk to each other. The FBI estimates there might be 25 to 50 active serial killers on America's highways at any given time. Most of them truckers. I printed out everything I could find and brought it to Jerry the next day. He listened, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "Sandra, honey, you're seeing things that aren't there," he said. "Carl's been nothing but polite every time he's come through. You can't go around accusing customers of being killers just because some girls went missing." But Jerry agreed to install new security cameras in the parking lot. Said it was overdue anyway. Carl's January visit changed everything. He came through right on schedule, 3rd Thursday, 2 a.m. Same order, same booth. But this time I was ready. I watched him watch the parking lot. I noticed him checking the corners of the dining room, looking for the new cameras Jerry had installed. When Carl went to the bathroom, I snuck outside to look at his truck. The Peterbilt looked normal from the outside. Clean, well-maintained, nothing suspicious. But when I walked around to the passenger side, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. The trailer had extra locks. Not normal cargo locks, heavy-duty deadbolts that had been added after the truck was built. And there were vents that didn't match the original refrigeration system. Like someone had modified the trailer for something other than hauling food. I heard footsteps on gravel and spun around. Carl was walking toward his truck, moving faster than a man his size should move. "Everything okay out here?" he asked. His voice was friendly, but his eyes weren't. "Just getting some air," I said, backing toward the restaurant. "Stuffy inside." Carl smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Dangerous for a young lady to be wandering around alone at night. A lot of bad people on these highways. I made it back inside, but my hands were shaking as I poured coffee for the other customers. Carl finished his meal and left without another word, but I felt his eyes on me the whole time. The next week, I found out why. Jenny, who worked the day shift, mentioned that a trucker had been asking about me. Wanted to know my full name, when I worked, if I had a car. She thought he was just interested in asking me out, so she told him I worked nights Thursday through Monday. The description she gave me matched Carl perfectly. That's when I knew I was being hunted. I started carrying pepper spray and keeping a knife in my apron. I asked Jerry to change my schedule, but we were short-staffed and he couldn't spare me on weekends. I thought about quitting, but I needed the money and didn't want to run from some psychopath. Besides, what if I was wrong? What if Carl was just a friendly trucker and I was being paranoid? That question got answered in February. Carl came through on schedule, but this time he wasn't alone. There was another trucker with him. Younger guy, maybe 30, with dead eyes and a nervous smile. They sat together in booth 7, whispering and pointing at things outside. I couldn't hear everything they said, but I caught enough to make me sick. "This one's perfect," the younger guy said. "Isolated, light security, only one girl on shift." "Told you," Carl replied. "Been watching this place for months." She's the right type too. Young, pretty, works alone. Nobody would miss her for hours. They were talking about me like I was livestock. When they left, I called the state police. Told them about Carl, about the missing women, about everything I'd figured out. The dispatcher was polite but skeptical. Without evidence, there wasn't much they could do. They said they'd look into it. 2 days later, another girl went missing. Jessica Walsh, 21, vanished from a truck stop near Salem. Security cameras showed her talking to 2 truckers right before she disappeared. I knew it was Carl and his partner. That night, I made a decision that probably saved my life. Instead of going home after my shift, I drove to the nearest police station and refused to leave until someone listened to my whole story. I brought printouts of all the missing women, maps showing the pattern of disappearances, everything I'd gathered. Detective Morrison took me seriously. Maybe because I had evidence, or maybe because I was obviously terrified. He put me in touch with an FBI agent named Sarah Chen, TAS, same last name as one of the missing girls, her sister. Agent Chen had been tracking exactly what I'd discovered. A network of trucker serial killers who communicated through CB radio and shared information about potential victims. They marked truck stops with good hunting potential and warned each other about increased police presence. Carl wasn't just one killer. He was part of an organized group that had been operating for years. The FBI set up surveillance at the crossroads. When Carl came through in March, they were ready. They followed him to a warehouse outside Portland, where they found evidence that made the news across the country. Modified truck trailers with hidden compartments, soundproofing, restraints, and trophies from at least 30 victims spanning 5 states. Carl broke under questioning and gave up his entire network. 12 truckers in total, operating across the western United States. They'd been killing for over a decade, using their legitimate jobs as cover for the worst kind of hunting. They found Jessica Walsh alive in a trailer outside Bakersfield. She was the only one they saved. The trial made national news. I testified about Carl's behavior, his questions, his pattern of visits. The defense tried to paint me as a paranoid waitress who watched too much true crime TV. But the evidence was overwhelming. Carl got life without parole. So did 6 of his partners. The others are still awaiting trial. I don't work at truck stops anymore. Can't bring myself to pour coffee for drivers without wondering what they might be hiding in their trailers. I finished my associate's degree and work at a bank now. Safer, more normal. But sometimes, driving down I-5, I see those big rigs rolling past, and I remember Carl's dead eyes watching me from booth 7. I remember how polite he was, how normal he seemed, how easy it would have been for him to make me disappear. The Highway Patrol estimates that Carl's network killed over 40 women across multiple states. Young women working alone, far from home, people who wouldn't be missed right away. They targeted the vulnerable, the isolated, the forgotten. If you work nights anywhere near a highway, trust your instincts. If someone makes you uncomfortable, don't ignore that feeling. And remember that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like friendly truckers who tip 15% and say please and thank you. Sometimes they drive the meat truck, and sometimes the meat they're hauling isn't what you think it is. I still have nightmares about Carl's smile and the modifications he made to his trailer. But mostly, I'm grateful I trusted my gut and spoke up before I became another missing person poster on a truck stop bulletin board. The convoy of death is still out there, just smaller now. And truck stops along I-5 are a little bit safer because one waitress paid attention and refused to stay quiet. But I'll never forget the sound of those extra locks on Carl's trailer, or the way he watched me like prey from booth 7. Some sounds stay with you forever. My name is Linda Morrison, and I've been driving school buses for 15 years here in rural Oregon. I got my CDL back in 2009 when my own kids started school, thinking it would be perfect timing, same hours as them, summers off, decent benefits. I've driven every route in Clackamas County at least once. I've handled everything from kids throwing up to flat tires and snowstorms, to that time Tommy Fletcher brought his dad's hunting knife to show and tell. But what happened last fall on Route 47 changed everything I thought I knew about keeping kids safe. Route 47 runs through the most isolated part of the county. 43 miles of winding mountain roads, connecting 12 bus stops scattered across farms and logging properties. Some of these kids live so far out that their neighbors are miles away. The route takes me 2 hours each way, morning pickup starting at 6:15 a.m., afternoon drop-off starting at 3:45 p.m. I knew every kid on that route by name. 26 regulars, ranging from kindergarten to high school. Most were good kids, quiet farm kids who did their chores and helped their families. But some were having rough times. Kids whose parents were going through nasty divorces. Kids who got picked on at school for being different. Kids who just seemed lost. My bus was a 2018 Thomas-built C28, nothing fancy but reliable. 48 passenger capacity, diesel engine, all the required safety equipment. I kept maintenance logs, did daily inspections, followed every protocol. I had a perfect safety record. Never had an accident, never lost a kid, never had a serious injury on my watch. That's why what happened still keeps me up at night. It started in October. I noticed that some of my regular kids weren't at their stops. At first, I thought they were just sick or had doctor appointments. But when I asked other kids on the bus, they'd give me blank looks. Who? They'd say. I don't know anyone named Sarah. But I remembered Sarah Martinez clearly. Quiet girl, about 12, always sat in the third seat on the left, thick glasses, carried a beat-up backpack covered in unicorn stickers. Her mom worked nights at the diner in town, so she was often tired in the mornings. Sarah had been riding my bus since 6th grade. When I checked my passenger logs, her name wasn't there. But I distinctly remembered marking her present every day for weeks. Then it was Tyler Chen. 8 years old, Asian kid with a speech impediment who got teased a lot. He always sat in the very front seat because the older kids made fun of him. One day his stop was empty, and when I asked his usual seat partner where Tyler was, the kid looked confused. There's nobody named Tyler on this bus, he said. I started keeping a notebook, writing down every kid's name, where they sat, details about them. When someone went missing, I'd have proof they existed. But every time I wrote about a missing kid, the writing would be gone the next day. Like I'd never written it at all. I tried calling parents when kids went missing. The strange thing was, half the numbers were disconnected. The other half, the parents would get confused when I mentioned their child. I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong number, Sarah's mom said when I called about Sarah not being at the bus stop. I don't have any children, but I remembered dropping Sarah off at that exact house dozens of times. I remembered Sarah's mom coming out to get her when she was running late. I remembered conversations about Sarah's grades, about how proud her mom was when Sarah made honor roll. When I drove by Sarah's house the next day, there was a for sale sign in the yard. The house looked empty, like no one had lived there in months. 3 weeks into October, I started seeing him. A tall man in an old-fashioned black suit, standing at the edge of the tree line near bus stops. Always too far away to see clearly, but close enough that I knew he was watching. He never moved, never waved, just stood there until I drove away. The first time I saw him was at Jeremy Watson's stop. Jeremy was 10, lived with his grandmother after his parents died in a car accident the year before. Shy kid, rarely talked to anyone, spent most of the bus ride looking out the window. The man in the suit was standing about 50 yards behind Jeremy's house, just at the edge of the forest. When I pulled up, Jeremy wasn't at his usual spot by the mailbox. I honked twice, our signal, but he didn't come out. I was about to drive on when I saw Jeremy walking slowly from the direction of the trees. He moved like he was sleepwalking, his eyes unfocused. When he got on the bus, he didn't say his usual quiet, "Good morning, Mrs. Morrison." He just sat down in his regular seat and stared straight ahead. "You okay, Jeremy?" I asked. He nodded, but didn't look at me. For the entire 40-minute ride to school, he didn't move. Didn't blink much either. That afternoon, Jeremy wasn't at the pickup spot after school. When I asked his teacher, she looked confused. Jeremy Watson? I don't have a student by that name. But I'd been driving Jeremy to school for 2 years. I knew which classroom was his, knew his teacher, knew he was failing math but excelling in art class. When I drove by Jeremy's house that evening, his grandmother was outside watering flowers. I stopped and asked about Jeremy. "Jeremy," she said, tilting her head. "Honey, I think you're confused. I live alone, always have." But I remembered Jeremy telling me about helping his grandmother with her garden. I remembered her waving from the porch when I dropped him off. I started researching, spent hours at the library going through old newspapers, looking for any mention of missing children or strange disappearances in the area. What I found made my blood run cold. Going back 80 years, there were reports of a man in an old-fashioned suit seen near schools and bus stops. Always during times when children went missing, the descriptions were always the same. Tall, pale, formal black suit that looked decades out of style. In 1943, a teacher named Elizabeth Morrison, 19 Marcus, no relation, just the same last name, reported seeing the man watching children during recess. She described him as having no proper face, just dark holes where eyes should be. 3 children disappeared from her school that year. When she tried to report it, other teachers claimed those children had never existed. The school had no records of them. Their families had no memory of them. Elizabeth Morrison was found dead in her classroom 3 weeks later. The official cause was listed as heart failure, but she was only 28 years old with no history of heart problems. I found similar reports every decade since then. Different witnesses, but always the same description of the man in the suit. Always the same pattern of children disappearing and everyone forgetting they'd ever existed. The most recent article was from 1987. A school bus driver named Robert Hayes reported seeing the man at rural bus stops. 5 children on his route disappeared over the course of 2 months. When Robert tried to file missing person reports, police told him no such children had ever been enrolled in the school district. Robert Hayes was found dead in his bus a week later. Engine was running, bus was in park, but Robert had no pulse. Coroner said it looked like he'd just stopped, like someone had turned him off. The locals had a name for the man in the suit. They called him the Collector. November brought more disappearances. Emma Rodriguez, a 15-year-old who was being bullied for her weight. Marcus Thompson, a 7-year-old whose parents were going through a messy divorce. Chloe Williams, a 13-year-old who'd been acting out since her dad lost his job, but sometimes kids would come back. They'd show up at their bus stops days later, acting strange, quiet, empty, like someone had scooped out everything that made them who they were. When I'd ask them where they'd been, they'd look at me with blank eyes and say they didn't remember. Their parents would claim they'd never been gone at all. I started carrying a small digital camera, trying to get proof. But every time I pointed it at the man in the suit, the camera would malfunction. Screen would go black, or it would show static, or the battery would die instantly, even though it had been fully charged. My bus radio started acting up too. Instead of dispatch, I'd sometimes pick up voices that sounded like children crying, or whispers in languages I didn't recognize. Once, I heard what sounded like Jeremy's voice saying, "He showed me what happens if I stay. It's better here, it's safe here." But Jeremy had been gone for weeks. In December, something different happened. A girl named Lisa Parker, IM 11 years old, parents recently divorced, struggling with depression, IMLF, missed her stop 3 days in a row. But on the 4th day, she was there, waiting like nothing had happened. Lisa was always a chatty kid, always asking questions about my family or telling me about books she was reading. But when she got on the bus that day, she sat down without saying a word. About halfway to school, she turned to me and said, "Mrs. Morrison, do you know about the gray place?" "What gray place, honey?" "The place between places, where the collector takes us." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "It's not scary once you get used to it. It's just empty. Gray everywhere. Gray sky, gray ground, gray buildings that don't make sense." I looked at her in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were different, still brown but empty, like looking into deep water. "There are other kids there," she continued. "Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They don't talk much anymore. They just walk around, waiting. Waiting for what? For him to decide if we're ready." She tilted her head. "He feeds on sadness, Mrs. Morrison, on loneliness and fear and all the hurt inside us. He makes it go away, but he keeps it. Makes him stronger." My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. "Lisa, where have you been for the past 3 days? Time works different there. Sometimes 3 days here is 3 minutes there. Sometimes 3 minutes here is 3 years there." She paused. "He showed me what my life would be like if I stayed here. All the pain, all the disappointment, how much it would hurt to keep living." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him I wasn't ready yet, that I wanted to see my mom one more time." Her voice got smaller. But he said I can come back anytime. He'll always be waiting. When we got to school, Lisa got off the bus normally. But I watched her walk toward the building, and something was wrong with her shadow. It moved just a second too late, like it was having trouble keeping up. That afternoon, Lisa wasn't at school for pickup. When I asked her teacher, she said Lisa Parker had transferred to a different school district the week before. But I'd just driven her that morning. By January, I'd lost 12 kids from my route. 12 children who had completely vanished from reality, leaving only my memories and a growing sense of dread. I started noticing patterns. The collector never took happy kids, never took kids who felt loved and secure. He targeted the ones who were hurting. Kids from broken homes, kids who were bullied, kids who felt invisible anyway. And I realized something that made my blood run cold. He wasn't just randomly taking kids, he was preparing for something bigger. I found surveillance footage from a gas station near one of my stops. The timestamp showed last Tuesday at 3:47 p.m., exactly when I would have been dropping kids off. In the background, you could see my bus stopped at the corner. But in the footage, the bus was empty. Just me, driving an empty bus, stopping at empty corners, opening the door for nobody. According to the surveillance system, I'd been driving an empty route for months. On February 14th, no Bersayan Day, Valentine's Day, I saw him clearly for the first time. I was dropping off the last kid of the day, a high school senior named David Chang, who lived at the end of a long dirt road. David was one of the few kids who hadn't disappeared, probably because he was confident and well-liked. The collector seemed to avoid kids like that. As David walked toward his house, I saw the man in the suit step out from behind a large pine tree about 30 feet away. He was impossibly tall, at least 7 feet, and thin like a scarecrow. The old-fashioned black suit hung on his frame like it was made for someone else. But what stopped my heart was his face. Or rather, the lack of one. Where his features should have been, there were just dark holes. Not black holes, darker than black. Like looking into the deepest part of space where no light had ever existed. He turned toward my bus, and I felt something cold and hungry reach into my mind. Asterisk, you see me. Asterisk, a voice said without sound. Asterisk, you remember them. Why? Asterisk, images flooded my head. All the missing children, standing in that gray place Lisa had described. They were lined up in rows like soldiers, their faces blank and empty. But they weren't just standing there, they were changing, becoming something else, something not quite human anymore. Asterisk, they were broken. Asterisk, the voice continued. Asterisk, I made them whole. I took their pain and made them useful. Asterisk, useful for what? I said out loud. Asterisk, the harvest. Asterisk, he replied. Asterisk, soon, all the broken children will join us. And then we'll take the ones who aren't broken yet. We'll take them all. Asterisk, I saw visions of empty schools, empty playgrounds, empty buses driving empty routes. A world where childhood had been erased, where innocence had been collected, and now consumed. Asterisk, you cannot stop this. Asterisk, the collector said. Asterisk, you can only choose. Join us willingly, or be forgotten like the others who tried to interfere. Asterisk. That's when I understood. I wasn't just a witness to this. I was next. I floored the gas pedal and got out of there as fast as that old bus would go. In my rearview mirror, I could see the collector growing larger, more solid, like my fear was feeding him. My radio crackled to life, but instead of dispatch, I heard children's voices. Hundreds of them, all speaking in unison. Don't leave us, Mrs. Morrison. Come back. It doesn't hurt here. Nothing hurts here. I recognized some of the voices. Sarah, Jeremy, Tyler. All the kids I'd lost. My cell phone started ringing. The caller ID said, Sarah Martinez, but Sarah's number had been disconnected for months. I didn't answer. It rang again. Jeremy Watson, again. Tyler Chen, all the missing kids, calling me from wherever they were. I turned the phone off, but it kept ringing anyway. By the time I got back to the bus depot, I was shaking so hard I could barely park. I ran inside and tried to tell my supervisor, Janet, what had happened. She looked at me like I was crazy. Linda, honey, are you feeling all right? You've been driving an empty route for months. There haven't been any kids assigned to Route 47 since October. Budget cuts, remember? I pulled out my notebook where I'd been writing down details about the missing children. The pages were blank. But I have 26 kids on that route, I insisted. I've been driving them for years. Janet pulled up the route assignments on her computer. Route 47 was listed as suspended, no students. According to the system, I'd been driving an empty bus for 4 months. I quit the next day. Told Janet I was having health problems and needed to take early retirement. She was understanding, said the stress of driving empty routes for months would get to anyone. I moved to Portland 2 weeks later, got a job at a grocery store, something far away from children and schools and the responsibility of keeping anyone safe. But I still remember them. Sarah with her unicorn backpack, Jeremy who loved to draw, Tyler with his speech impediment, Emma who dreamed of being a veterinarian. All the kids the world forgot, but I somehow can't. Sometimes I drive back to Clackamas County just to see if anything's changed. The bus stops are still there, but they're overgrown with weeds now, like they haven't been used in years. But I know the collector is still out there, still watching, still collecting, and I know he's not finished. Last week, I saw a news report about a sudden drop in school enrollment across rural Oregon. Dozens of children, gone. Not missing, the reports say these children never existed in the first place. School records show no evidence they were ever enrolled. But I know better. If you work with kids, teacher, bus driver, counselor, anyone, pay attention to the quiet ones. The lonely ones, the kids who seem invisible even when they're standing right in front of you. And if you ever see a tall man in an old-fashioned suit watching from the edge of the trees, don't look too long. He might decide you remember too much.